The crack was maybe 3 millimeters wide, maybe less. You could miss it if you weren't looking for it, and most people weren't. I was. I'd been working the same section of the Harvey Passage water control structure for 11 days straight, and I knew every bolt on that thing the way you know the face of someone you've lived with for years. Not because I was proud of it, because that's the job. You look. You measure. You write it down. You look again. The crack ran along the lower weld seam of the eastern gate anchor, the one that bore the full lateral load when the Bow River ran high, and in late May in Calgary, the bow doesn't ask permission, it just comes. I crouched down with my flashlight and put my thumb next to it. Didn't touch, just measured with my eye, 3 millimeters, maybe 4. I took a photo with my phone, then another from a different angle. Then I pulled out my notebook. The actual paper one I'd carried for 12 years, waterproof cover, the elastic going on it, and I wrote down the time, 7:14 a.m. Tuesday. The gate serial number, the weld location. The approximate length of the crack, which I now estimated at 6 centimeters running diagonally from the lower left corner of the anchor plate. I'd done the load calculations on this structure myself 3 years ago, when we first won the maintenance contract. I knew what that anchor was holding. I knew what would happen if it let go during a high water event. I stood up, put my phone in my chest pocket, and walked back to the site trailer. That was the morning everything changed. I just didn't know it yet. Kevin Marsh. My name is 41 years old. I work in civil infrastructure maintenance, which means I fix things people don't think about until they break. Culverts, retaining walls, weirs, the unglamorous skeleton of a city that keeps water where it's supposed to be and ground where it's supposed to stay. I've been doing this for 16 years. Started as a laborer, got my certification, worked my way up to site lead. I make decent money, not great money, but decent. Enough for the house in Forest Lawn, the truck payments, and Lena's hockey fees, which are, I will tell you honestly, not cheap. Lena is my daughter. She's 9. She has her mother's eyes and my stubbornness, which is a combination that keeps me on my toes. Her mother, Jess, moved to Vancouver 4 years ago. We're civil. We share custody on paper, but in practice I've got Lena most of the time because Jess travels for work and Calgary is what Lena knows. Her school, her team, her life. It's just the two of us in that house, and that's fine. We've got a rhythm. I tell you all this because it matters to what happened next. It matters that I was a man with specific, non-negotiable obligations. It matters that I could not afford, in any sense of that word, to be wrong about what I saw on that anchor plate. Because I was about to be told, very clearly, by someone with a great deal more money and power than me, that I was wrong. I knocked on the site trailer door at 7:22 a.m. and waited. Our project manager, Dale, was on the phone. He waved me in without looking up. I sat in the plastic chair across from his desk and waited. The trailer smelled like burnt coffee and the particular damp that comes from muddy boots tracked in over weeks. Outside, I could hear the river. May runoff. Loud. Dale hung up. He was a good man, Dale. 15 years in the industry. He'd trained me on my first real job, actually. A culvert replacement out in Strathmore. He had 2 grandkids and a truck older than mine, and he always brought a thermos of real coffee instead of using the machine. Marsh, he said. What've you got? I showed him the photos first, then the notebook. I walked him through the weld location, the load-bearing function, the diagonal orientation of the crack which, I explained, was consistent with shear stress rather than simple surface corrosion. That mattered. Corrosion cracks different. This was movement. Dale looked at the photos for a long time. How confident are you? He said, and it wasn't really a question. Confident enough to be sitting here at 7 in the morning instead of eating my sandwich. He almost smiled. Almost. Here's the thing, he said. He set the phone down. He rubbed his face with both hands the way a man does when he's about to say something he doesn't want to say. The Whitmore Group is doing a site inspection this afternoon. I knew the name. Everyone in the industry knew the name. The Whitmore Group had come into Calgary infrastructure investment about 4 years ago. Private capital, government contracts, fast money and faster timelines. They'd bought up 3 maintenance contracts in the last 2 years, including, as of 8 months ago, ours. Okay, I said. Nadine Whitmore is going to be there herself. I'd never met her. I'd seen her photo in the business section of the Herald. She was in her mid-50s, white hair, she wore short. The kind of face that had learned not to show what it was thinking. She'd built the company after her divorce and grown it into something that did business across 4 provinces. She was, and this is not an exaggeration, worth somewhere in the vicinity of $400 million. She's been pushing to get this project signed off, Dale continued. The gate upgrade report is supposed to go to the city next week. If we flag a structural issue now, that gets pushed. Probably by months, maybe more. There's a budget review in June, and she needs this contract renewal in her column before then. I looked at him. Dale, I said. I know, I'm not flagging a maybe. I'm flagging a 6-centimeter diagonal shear crack on a load-bearing anchor plate with the bow running at 60% capacity and spring melt still 3 weeks out. I know, Kevin. If that gate fails during a high-water event, I know what it means. We sat there for a moment. The river was loud outside. Write up your report, Dale said finally. Full documentation. I'll figure out the afternoon. I wrote the report. 4 pages, detailed. Load-bearing specifications, photographic evidence, comparison to the original weld inspection from 2019, my professional assessment of risk. I sent it to Dale at 10:30. I printed a copy and put it in my truck. At 2 p.m., I was standing at the eastern gate anchor when a convoy of 3 black SUVs pulled up to the site access road. I watched from a distance as Nadine Whitmore stepped out of the second vehicle. She was exactly as I'd imagined, which is to say she looked like someone who had learned, over many decades, to take up exactly the right amount of space and not 1 centimeter more. Dark jacket, good boots, practical, not decorative. She had 2 people with her, younger, tablets in hand, and behind them a man I recognized, Ian Greer, the city's deputy director of infrastructure. Not someone I'd expected to see. Dale was walking out to meet them. He caught my eye briefly as he passed me. His expression said nothing, which told me everything. I went back to the anchor. I was kneeling down, re-examining the crack. I'd put a small piece of yellow marker tape beside it that morning, standard practice, when I heard footsteps on the gravel behind me. Is that the issue? I turned. Nadine Whitmore was standing 3 meters away, looking at me the way someone looks at a minor obstacle they're calculating how to walk around. Yes, ma'am, I said. I stood up. Kevin Marsh. Site lead. I've read your report, she said. She said it the way you'd say I've heard your excuse. You're suggesting a structural fault on a plate that was inspected 14 months ago and passed. I'm documenting what I found this morning. The inspection 14 months ago was visual, from the surface. This crack is on the lower weld face. You wouldn't see it from standard inspection position. Our engineers reviewed the photo documentation this afternoon. She gestured to one of the tablet people. The assessment is that it's surface oxidation. Not structural. I felt something drop in my chest, not anger. More like a door closing. With respect, I said, surface oxidation on a carbon steel weld at this age would present differently. The orientation of this crack is consistent with shear. That's not oxidation, Mr. Marsh. She looked at me directly. I appreciate thoroughness. It's a good quality in a site lead. But I have an engineering team and they've looked at your evidence and reached a different conclusion. She paused. The project completion report goes to the city next week. That's not changing. I didn't say anything. What I can do, she said, and her voice changed slightly. Not warmer exactly, but with something added to it, something careful, is make sure your file reflects your diligence. That kind of attention to detail is valuable. There's a senior site supervisor position opening on the Glenmore Reservoir project. Full-time, 2-year contract. Better rate than what you're on. I looked at her. She held my gaze. I just need you to understand, she continued, that professional opinions sometimes differ, and in this case the weight of opinion falls elsewhere. So you've done your job. You've documented. Now the decision is above your pay grade. She said it without malice. That was almost the worst part. The Glenmore project, I said. It's a good position. What happens if I don't agree that it's oxidation? Something shifted in her eyes. Not much, but enough. Then I'd say you're a man who's having trouble letting go of an initial assessment, which happens to good workers sometimes. It doesn't have to define your career. She tilted her head slightly. But it can. She walked back toward Dale and Ian Greer. I stood there next to the crack in the anchor plate and the river ran loud behind me, and I thought about Lena's hockey fees and the truck payment and the fact that a 2-year senior contract with the Glenmore project would genuinely change things for us in a material way. I thought about all of it, And then I took out my phone and called the City of Calgary's Infrastructure Safety Reporting Line. They have a process. People don't think about that, but they do. There's a duty inspector, and when you call with a specific structural concern, location, component, documentation, they take it seriously. It's not like complaining to a customer service line. There's a protocol. I stayed on site for 40 minutes after the call, long enough to watch Nadine Whitmore's convoy drive away, long enough for Dale to walk over to me, hands in his jacket pockets, and not say anything for a moment. "You called the city," he said. He nodded slowly. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. "She's going to pull the contract, Kevin. I know. That's 4 of us out of work. I know that too." He stood there. The river. The late afternoon light going gold on the water. "I don't think you're wrong," he said quietly. "About the crack. I know you don't." He walked back to the trailer. I drove home and I picked up Lena from her friend Becca's place, and I made spaghetti, and I didn't tell her anything except that work had been a long day. She showed me a drawing she'd done in art class. A horse, which was her current obsession, and we talked about horses for most of dinner. After she went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table for a while with a cup of tea gone cold, and I thought, I could be completely wrong. The oxidation call could be right. I could have just ended 4 people's livelihoods over a crack I misread. That thought stayed with me all night. The city's duty inspector came to site 2 days later, Thursday morning, early. He brought a structural engineer, a woman named Dr. Okafor from the University of Calgary Civil Engineering Department, who the city used as an independent reviewer for exactly these situations. She had her own equipment. She did a dye penetrant test on the weld seam. She took core samples from 2 points along the crack. Dale and I stood back and watched. It took about 2 hours. Dr. Okafor spoke to the inspector first, quietly. Then she came over to where I was standing. "Mr. Marsh," she said, "the crack is in the base metal, propagating from an existing weld defect. It's approximately 9 centimeters. You measured it at 6, but it extends behind the surface rust. The orientation is consistent with cyclic shear loading." She paused. "If the river comes up another 40% and the gate operates under full load, the probability of anchor failure is significant." I heard Dale exhale behind me. "The gate's going offline today," she continued. "We'll need to assess bypass options while repairs are arranged. The completion report to the city is going to reflect an undisclosed structural defect." She looked at me steadily. "Your documentation was correct," she said. I nodded. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. The Whitmore Group pulled our contract 2 weeks later. Dale had predicted it, and he was right. 4 of us were out of work by the end of June. I won't tell you that didn't hurt, because it did. I had 3 weeks where I was checking job boards every morning before Lena woke up and running numbers on my savings account in my head while I made her school lunches. But here's the part that happened, that I didn't expect. Ian Greer, the deputy director, the one who had been standing behind Nadine Whitmore during the site inspection, the one I had assumed was on her side, called me in for a meeting 6 days after the contract was pulled. He sat across from me in a city office on McLeod Trail, and he said, "We've been looking at the inspection records for the Whitmore Group's other contracts in this city. Your report raised questions that went beyond your specific site." He didn't tell me everything. I understood later, from people who would know, that the dye-penetrant results from the Harvey site had prompted the city to commission independent reviews of 2 other Whitmore-maintained structures, that those reviews had found issues. Not identical, different sites, different problems, but a pattern consistent with inspection documentation that was, let's say, optimistic. Ian Greer offered me a position that day. Not the Glenmore project. That was a Whitmore contract and was now frozen pending review. He offered me a role in the city's own infrastructure assessment team, inspector level. Better pay than I'd been on. City benefits. Pension. I said yes. I didn't say it immediately, because I'm not someone who makes decisions fast. I said, "Can I let you know by Friday?" He said yes. I called him Thursday morning and said yes. Lena's spring hockey tournament was the weekend after I started the new position. They played 3 games in 2 days out at the Acadia Recreation Complex, and I was there for all of them. I brought the good thermos, the one I'd bought myself the previous Christmas and hadn't had much occasion to use. I stood at the boards and watched my daughter play defense, with a kind of controlled aggression that made me slightly nervous and very proud in equal measure. After the second game, she came off the ice and I handed her the water bottle and she said, still breathing hard, "Did you see that last check?" I saw it. Was it clean? It was clean. She nodded, satisfied. We drove home through the city and the bow was running full and brown with the melt, the way it does every May, and I looked at it as we crossed the bridge and thought about anchor plates and shear loads, and the very specific weight of a decision made in the early morning, with no one watching and nothing to gain from it. "Dad," Lena said. She was looking at her phone. She had one of those cases that looked like a frog. I'd told her it was ridiculous. She'd said that was the point. "Yeah, Becca says the river's going to flood. Becca's not wrong. It's going to be high. But that's what the structures are for." She looked out the window at the water. "Do the structures work?" she asked. "When people do their jobs right," I said, "they do." She seemed to accept that. She went